Turn, O virgin daughter of Israel, to these your highways by which you went. Welcome to Reunion Roadmap, a place to discover the people and communities along the highway of restoration for Israel's house of Joseph. Reunion Roadmap is a B'nai Yosef North America production. Be our guest for the next hour as we meet the people of the emerging house of Joseph here in North America. This is Sophania Pappas for B'nai Yosef North America, and with me is Al McCarn, our Executive Director. And we are going to part 5 with the Klikas in Wisconsin.
Yeah, we are. It's been a long interview. You know, this is the first time we have split something across 5 programs, but the Klikas have so much to share with us. Barb, of course, has been doing most of the talking, but while we were interviewing them, Bob was sitting right there with her, and you have heard him interject from time to time at important parts of the story. But, you know, it's a comprehensive testimony covering 30 or 40 years of their lives.
Yes.
How the Lord grabbed them in their separate spiritual development. She is a Lutheran, he is a Catholic, brought them into closer relationship with him and with one another, highlighted elements of this spiritual walk, and oh, by the way, the spiritual warfare and the conditions surrounding us in that unseen realm.
Yeah.
How he called them into observing Torah, understanding their Hebraic identity. And now in this last part, we get to hear about the nuts and bolts of set-apart ministries, how they have learned to grow together and function as a community in the last 18 or 19 years. It's a pretty interesting story, and I think, Stefania, it is one that applies to all of us in different ways.
Absolutely. And like in this 5th segment, you mentioned that we're different members in one body. And so not all of us are called to really get into the nitty-gritty of it like Barb is. And that's the direction myself and Raina are going, into the nitty-gritty part as well. But we all need to be aware of it because we know he's a roaring lion and he's seeking to devour every single one of us.
That is the truth about the enemy of our souls. And what I also understand from my military background in particular is we are to know our own jobs, our own functions intimately. But if we do not understand how we fit together with those on our right and on our left, then the entire effort will suffer. And it's the truth in the kingdom of heaven as it is in all other aspects of life. So why don't we go on back to Wisconsin? Let's finish up our visit with Barb and Bob Klika.
Then there was more of the fine-tuning and the pruning. Remember I said I thought I only wanted a little pruning on the edges, that I thought maybe that would be enough. I would never need any major pruning again. No, that's not the case. There's more major pruning to come, because I was in the process of learning how to go from the therapy room to the whole community, and that's difficult. 2004 was a year for understanding some of those things. Walking the road of humiliation and dignity and grace, also a concept from Jeremiah, was something that was emphasized for me. And then the really scary one, learning how to love the betrayer as Messiah loved Judas. And I was pretty sure I couldn't do that myself. I still know that I can't do that myself. So there have been many instances of betrayal and disrespect, things I never experienced as a professional that have been more fully evident in ministry than they were before. A lot of it was because of working with such traumatized people. Other people didn't understand what was going on here. They didn't understand the protectiveness I needed to portray for them, that I needed to be very much on guard of anything spiritually unhealthy or occult, all those things that I learned in the New Age stuff to be aware of. And I'm sad to say that people did try to bring those things into our Shabbat gatherings. And so we had to set limits and boundaries and say no to that. So there were difficult times there for sure. I knew from the beginning that pride is usually the biggest downfall of any ministry at all. So that was something that was a real frequent prayer for me. I was just thinking of this right now. There was a time, over a 2-week time period, I had 3 different people approach me and tell me that I was not getting the respect I deserved. I ought to be being viewed as a spiritual leader in the Green Bay area, on and on like that. 2 of them were people I knew. And the third one was literally a lady who came in off the street because she saw Set Apart Ministries in the window. And I said no to all of them. No, that's not the way it works. And after that, I don't know, maybe you can relate. You have that sense of Yeshua being pleased with you. I passed a test there. I've been grateful for that. And I know that's one thing I've been aware of. I have not really ever talked publicly a whole lot about the deliverance ministry and work because I'm kind of wary of people who get a little bit too sensationalistic and, they kind of feed on the wrong things, I guess.
Yeah.
So I've been wary of not wanting to go there. It seems like the time is here now, though, because I used to think that only certain people who had a specific call needed to know these things. But with what I'm seeing in the world and in the assemblies and in the traditional church now, my understanding now is nobody can be a casual believer. We all need to be equipped to stand firm and to know how to recognize it. And the sooner you recognize it, the sooner you can deal with it.
Let me throw this out and see if this is a useful way to look at it. We have a great deal of the Torah devoted to the regulations regarding the priesthood, how they are to dress, how they are to act, who they are to marry, how they conduct themselves, how to remain clean. It seems to me that the only ones who need to know that down to the finest detail are the priests themselves, the Levites who serve them, and their families. Now, the rest of the nation needs to be familiar with what it's required to be a priest and to serve as a priest, not so they can do the mission, but so they can come alongside and help the priests do what they're doing, and in the same way, be ministers to all around them. So that's what I'm hearing when you're telling me about understanding the unseen world. We don't need to have a great number of experts in it, but it is something that everyone needs to know because it's good for the health of the body. And oh, by the way, the more of us who are familiar with these things, the more we can help those warriors who are called to deal with it directly and head on.
Yeah, I think it has to do with, the fences, the Torah righteousness. When we're walking in community and we're with people who understand what his righteous teachings are, we're less apt to walk out and be in danger.
Yeah.
So that's really important. Then we look at the priesthood of all believers, and I look at how much further that needs to go there, that as we are ourselves walking after him in the way he calls us, we are, by our very presence, bringing his presence to people. And so that's part of the protection that should be there in a community. That should be part of the iron sharpening iron process that's going on. But unfortunately, hasn't always worked that way. And our kind of Western church model, I'm afraid, has been kind of you go to church and put your hour in, and then maybe you do one class during the week, but that's about it. And there's too strong a boundary between that and all of life. Whereas I think what I understand now is there shouldn't be a boundary between all of life and your faith walk at all.
Correct.
So after I got to know Baya, she asked me to learn about this a little bit. She asked me to do a survey of Messianic congregations and leaders. That was in the early 2000s, somewhere around 3 or 4. So I did. I think I spoke with maybe about 100 congregational leaders by survey, by phone. One was international, I remember. So I understood and learned more about what small assemblies were facing. Something I would like to do again, because at that time, I don't think I found more than 1 or 2 that had been in existence for more than 10 years. They were all pretty young in the early stages of development. So I'm going to guess that by now, there's going to be more assemblies that have been around longer. Although that's part of what the things that I write about and what we teach about has to do with, because there's this awful cycle of too many home fellowships coming together in joy and excitement initially, and they concentrate on one aspect, on the Torah teaching, but they haven't understood what they need to do to build relationships and prepare for when things don't exactly go right. And so then they fly apart and form and reform and all kinds of issues like that. So that's something that we have in our writings and materials to talk about too. So I would love to do that at some point. We'll see what happens. So it's somewhere around in this time period, it gets really hard for me to separate what my own personal walk is and what Set Apart Ministries is, because he's really been growing us. The shepherd who doesn't run away kind of thing. It kind of makes me sad now when I remember the church understanding and things like the pastor who said, oh, I've been here too long. I know everybody too well. I can't minister anymore. That's part of the challenge that our community has had to deal with, I think, because we pretty much all know one another's weaknesses and we know one another's strengths. And that's part of our halakha, which is to know that so that we can be of help to encourage and teach and exhort one another, not so that it's used in a malicious way. And what we've seen through the years is that that's very frightening for a lot of people because they've had too many experiences where people deal with whatever isn't quite right by cutting them out or in some way defining them out. And it happens from leadership too, all too often. So it makes it more challenging for people who are feeling the call to come alongside and encourage and teach others, which is another thing that we write about.
So how's it been in this last decade? I mean, 19 years, you've explained how Set Apart Ministries was established, and then the early 2000s, you get your feet under you and you get an idea which direction you're going. Now that you've been doing this for a while, how is it?
Wow, that's a big question. I really wish everybody was here to answer this question.
Well, we haven't interviewed an entire congregation yet, but maybe we'll do that one day.
Well, they've all got something to say, let me tell you.
Challenging.
Challenging.
Yeah. I think that Yahweh has allowed things to happen to us that he then walks us through, and then we process, and I'm the scribe. So, what he teaches us, what we learn, that's a lot of what's on our website. That's what I've shared because I think he's just been taking us through a lot of different things so that we could be in the position to do that. What's it been like? Yeah, challenging. One of our ladies has called it that sometimes people have trouble if they happen to be with us and some kind of a argument or a difference of opinion comes up, because we'll work with it until we get to the other side of it. But it frightens a lot of people and they leave. So she puts it as like sometimes our undies show, so you need to know that right up front, But don't panic because that is part of the iron sharpening iron process. So that's something that has happened around 2010, 2012 in there. I was seeing passive aggressive behavior. From a clinician therapist standpoint, that's a personality issue where people have a hard time dealing straight up with things. And so rather than being direct, they kind of beat around the bush, or they don't want to exactly bring up something they're upset about, but they just hold on to being upset about it and won't bring it up till later. That makes it really hard to function well as a community, as an assembly, if people are hiding in the weeds like that. But around 2012 and then into 2013, oh my goodness, I right now I'm not sure I remember what prompted it, but I started looking more fully into that to see, is there a biblical definition of that? I understood some of the references. One of the Psalms, I believe, or proverb, his words were like butter, but in his heart were drawn swords. So that's kind of an example of what being passive aggressive is about. And we recognize that everybody can be passive aggressive once in a while. That's normal, that happens. But when you start seeing somebody who behaves that way on a regular basis, this is destructive. And I began to see some of the demonic, unholy, spiritual aspects with it. So I did a word study, and there's an article on our website on that. And we as a community made a covenant with one another that if we see that kind of behavior with one another, we will bring it into the light and we will address it until it's resolved in a way that's Yahweh honoring. So that article has been on the website since 2013. For 5 years, it was being downloaded 200 to 300 times a month. I only heard from a few people, so I have no clue who all those people are who read it. But I'm guessing that other people must have been recognizing passive-aggressive behavior too. And they need to know what's the scriptural way to deal with that.
One thing we haven't asked yet is, what is your website?
SetApartMinistries.org with hyphens. Yeah, so that's, what's been happening in Set Apart Ministries. My goodness, we've been doing the life model groups now for ladies from the beginning. We now have 2 men's life model groups because we have some local and some in other states where we meet with that. So that's helping to deal with maturity. One of our members' adult children was arrested for sexual abuse of a minor in 2008, I think. So we became a member of the local Brown County Prison Aftercare Network. So since then, we have helped 5 ex-offenders on their release from prison. That's been challenging. We have Kenya, Set Apart Ministries, Yahweh Set Apart Ministries in Kenya. They contacted us, and I was able to go there and visit a number of years ago when they had 12 assemblies. I got to visit 8 of them. They now have 20, plus some in Tanzania and Uganda as well. So we continue to be supportive and encouraging of them. That's been an amazing thing. Never, ever, ever did I think I would ever get to Africa. A lot of times there were situations where people didn't understand what was happening, and they would be very angry with me and cause some difficulty or make accusations without understanding what was going on. So that, I think everybody who's any kind of a leadership position has that happen from time to time, and being able to work through it is always a challenge. We've also experienced a situation within the last year where we had some people come and make accusations of our whole assembly, which were not accurate. What I'm happy to say is that our whole assembly has been able now to respond in a way that's God-honoring. We've taken a look at what it means to accuse and bear false witness, and what's the Yahweh honoring response. How do you deal with that? And as miserable and sad and difficult as that all is, I have a feeling that that's another area that we need to be preparing to walk in, because as the world gets darker, believers are going to come under more and more scrutiny and false witness coming against us. And so there again, it's that, how do we bear that in humility? How do we bear that being like Messiah, loving our betrayer? And at the same time, I mean, we have Paul's witness too, that he didn't hesitate to use his status as a Roman citizen when he needed to. What is the correct way? How do we, in a mature Yahweh honoring way, handle that? That is part of the spiritual warfare that's coming, because if we don't handle it in a Yahweh honoring way, and we bear ill will or we hold resentment, things that are not resolved, what we're doing is kind of opening the door for the evil one to have an input into our lives. And even 1 or 2 people doing that individually will affect not only their individual righteousness, but it'll affect the corporate righteousness of the community as well. So I think that that's going to be something, when I'm through the writing project I'm on right now, I'm thinking that that's going to be something I'm going to need to address. You hear maybe from different people than I do, but the idea of people not really understanding something and not taking the time to know before they speak Lashon Hara, or they make accusations. It's like the old story of the rabbi saying, it's like ripping open the feather pillow. And once all those feathers take to the wind, you can't really pull them all back again. So what is the Yahweh honoring way to restore and to deal with that? That's one example of what, we've been dealing with in recent years.
It sounds like you have been through the ringer for the benefit of the larger body. For 19 years you've been doing this, but it really sounds like you're just still beginning.
In some ways, yes. Yes, you're right. It was a personal story to begin with, I think, because that was his calling to me. And then he brought the people. I never advertised or went looking for them, but we stood together with them, and we've been developing a community. And now it's not just me, it's all of us standing together as a community, having learned more about how to exhort and encourage one another, having learned more about what maturity means, what recovery from trauma means. And I can't tell you what a blessing it is when I hear our people talking about their relationships with other people outside of Set Apart Ministries, where they apply what they've learned here and they're able to help and encourage other people too. That's just tremendous. I think that's part of the witness we're supposed to be being. But unless we get our feet solidly on the rock, and not only the spiritualizing part of it, but also our mind, will, and emotions, so that we're working out our salvation with fear and trembling, we're not just waiting. God's not going to do it all. He reaches us where we are, but he takes us through all these circumstances. So, yeah, just begun. It seems like that in some ways. It would be probably 18 years ago we started praying, mostly I think because of the influence of having so many people with occult backgrounds. We started praying specifically that Yahweh would expose anything within us or between us or among us that was not pleasing to him. And we wanted that to be out in the open so that it wasn't kicking around under the table. But it was scary to pray that way. Because what if he brings it out? And he has.
Yes.
He has brought it out. So We learned a year later that we had better also pray for his strength and joy and courage that we could work through these things to be able to come out the other side, and then that we're stronger for it. So I've asked at some of the teleconferences I've done, I've asked for other communities who have done this. I've only found individuals who ever prayed that way to ask that he would literally expose things. And we can certainly understand why people don't go there, because it's a scary thing to pray. But the fruit of it has been good. We can see that. So there's an article about that on the website too. That's part of Messiah's bride being made ready without spot or blemish, so that the evil one doesn't have anything in us, so that we are not offendable. I wish I could say we've completely arrived there. I'm sure we haven't, but we're aware, we see the mark, we see it's up there, that's what we're headed for. And we would certainly want to encourage other people to do that too. And we'd like to hear about their experiences.
As we are coming down to the end of our time with you, it sounds like this is a good place to end. But again, it's a place to begin. So Barb and Bob Klika, thank you for sharing this incredible story with us. And I would hope that our listeners would take a look at the website. That's setapartministries.org, but set-apart-ministries.org, and engage in a dialogue with you and share some of the things they have learned along the way, and learn some more of what you have learned. So thank you not only...
That would be a tremendous blessing.
Yes, I think that would be a tremendous blessing all the way around. So thank you again, not just for sharing your story, but for being open and serving the entire body of our Messiah in this way.
Indeed. Thank you for all that you're doing.
Barry Phillips and the Aleph Tav Band now sing "We Need Your Healing."
Breath of heaven, breathe on us again. Let you wind blow, bring life to this land. Waters from above come pouring down. Wash this dusty clay, flood the thirsty ground. We need your healing, we want to live again. Only you can give us life, and that's your calling to those forgotten. Let your chosen ones arise. Blind eyes open, lame jump and dance. The weak are made strong, take a holy stand. Voices crying out, let your will be done. Sin shoot now, let kingdom come. We need your healing, we want to live again. Only you can give us life, send out your calling to those forgotten. Let your chosen ones arise. We need your healing, we want to live again. Only you can give us life, send out your calling to those forgotten. Let your chosen ones arise. Breath of heaven, breathe on us again. Let your wind blow, breathe life to this land. Waters from above come pouring down. Wash the dusty clay, flood the thirsty ground. We need your healing, we want to live again. Only you can give us life, send out your calling to those forgotten. Let your chosen ones arise. We need your healing, we want to live again. Only you can give us life, send out your calling to those forgotten. Let your chosen ones arise. Blind eyes open, the lame jump and dance. The weak are made strong, take a holy stand. Voices crying out, let your will be done. since you now let your kingdom come. Let your kingdom come. Let your kingdom come. Thank you, Yahweh. Hello, this is the Midrash portion of the Reunion Roadmap. I'm Barry Phillips, elder with B'nai Joseph in North America, and along with me today is Frank Houts, a fellow elder from Winchester, Kentucky. Frank, I trust you're doing well today.
Yes, I am, Barry. Thank you very much. How are you?
It's been a little of a challenge today to get this program together, but the Father's helping us right now. Everything seems to be technically correct. And frustration, feelings of angst, anger, depression, perhaps other negative emotions or life experiences like jealousy or rage. They not only influence us emotionally and perhaps relationally in a horizontal arena where we're relating to others, but there's a text that has always intrigued me, Frank, in Vayikra, or Leviticus chapter 10, right after the episode of Nadav and Avihu putting incense on a incense pan or a fire holder and offering it in a strange manner to Yah. They were consumed, and Yah says this in chapter 10, verse 3, "By those who come near me, let me be set apart, and before all the people, let me be esteemed." The way we used to preach that in my Church of God days, "Be ye holy, for I am holy." So
You got it down, Barry.
well, I've had practice. So there is this understanding of the great esteem, the overwhelming sense of set-apartness or holiness of Elohim. And with all of our stuff that we seem to accumulate, the negative emotions we listed a few moments ago, how do we dare even try to approach his presence? Is it, well, I trust only in Yeshua and he overlooks everything else? Or do we need to do something in our own effort to set ourselves apart? How do we dare approach him, Frank, when he is so overwhelmingly holy?
Well, that's a really good question, Barry, and I'm not sure that I have the full comprehension of what we need to do in order to approach someone so holy. I have noticed some things and had a good friend that is a rabbi in the conservative movement. He's someone who pointed out some things to me years ago. And one of the things he would use to point this out or to show it is that he had developed a series of levels of thinking, levels of reasoning. Mm-hmm. And in his levels of reasoning, as you went up these levels of reasoning, you actually had to become very secure in how you were doing and going to the next step. And he showed how you can get locked. You can just be frozen on a certain level of reasoning.
Right.
But in the process, he says that if you ever come in contact with a holy thing, if you don't have sufficient peace, then you cannot actually, deal with it. It will respond to you in a way that is he calls it demonic. And I guess what he's actually trying to say there is that it goes awry. Everything that holiness has, it takes the other side. Now, that doesn't mean that there's demons there or anything like that. It just, you have that kind of response. I'm sure most of us have tried to go in and explain to a friend some idea that we have in Scripture and watch them just go ballistic for no reason whatsoever. Mm. And that comes from the fact that we have disturbed their peace, their inner peace. And so the question I guess you're asking is, how do we get that inner peace with God? Because that's really what we need in order to be able to relate to him. We have to have the security that we are doing what he wants us to do. And there's a verse that just strikes me as, it's one of those verses where you can read it 1,000 times and totally miss it. And then suddenly you go, what? And you go back and read it. But that's Exodus 33:11. It says, "So the Lord spoke to Moses face to face as a man speaks to his friend." That's where we normally stop hearing. It says, "And he would return to the camp, but his servant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, did not depart from the tabernacle."
Mm-hmm.
Now, what we have here is that Moses was going in, and Moses was the person of maturity and of understanding who was going in and talking to God, and God was giving him, his wisdom. He was sharing with him his wisdom for those people, which we know as Torah. And he was sharing with them how to make judgments on Torah issues. And so Moses was almost to the point of being God's good friend. And the only reason I don't want to put him there is because, can mankind ever attain that type of friendship? I don't know.
Right.
But anyway, here Moses was at that spot where God was saying, we can speak to each other face to face. But Joshua, who was coming along, he was going to be the next in charge, which we find out later. But Joshua stayed in God's presence continually. Now, you see, that is the missing element, and that is the point of getting the security that he needed. You see, Joshua and Caleb went into the land, and they spied out the land, but 10 people came back, and they saw that the land was foreboding. They saw, these huge giants in the land. They saw the good fruit, but they were more concerned with what they could not do because they weren't capable. Joshua and Caleb came back, and they didn't have that problem. And the reason I believe that Joshua didn't have that problem is that he stood in the presence of God so much that he understood it's God, it's not him. You see, if you get focused on it being you and everything that you do, then you're going to fall short, and it's going to be a major, major issue in your life. But when your focus is on who God is and the character of God, we too often confuse the idea of name as it being some magical pronunciation of God's name, when in reality it is his character.
Mm-hmm.
It is everything that comes to mind when you think of him. It is how he behaves, how he rules, his dominion. And when you realize that you understand, or when you come to the point of understanding God, it takes away the fear of, oh no, he might wipe me out, and brings in the fear of, this is an awesome God.
I'm thinking of a teaching that we don't hear a whole lot about, and that is clean and unclean, common and that which is set apart. And it is the duty of the Levitical priesthood to teach what is clean, unclean, what is set apart, and what is common. I think that we struggle at times, Frank, in on both aspects, that we treat Yahweh commonly. There is the adage that I just want to crawl up in his lap and be his little child and let Abba, Daddy, God dote on me. Come brazenly through a supposed rent veil into the Holy of Holies and just crawl up on the Ark of the Covenant and be seated with him because, well, Yeshua loves me so much. On the other side, there are those who feel like, if I don't have my tallit over my head and I have it mikvahd, I can't pray. If I don't use the exact right wording, he's more impressed by the exactness of my prayer and how I pray it than the content of my heart trying to be expressed to him. I think the reality is somewhere in the middle of all of that. So are we erring and treating him commonly, and are we erring and making it too hard to not just to pray, but to worship, to be in his presence, to seek that inner sanctum, if you will, of encountering him?
I think that it has something to do with our heart in the situation and how we're actually viewing what's going on. You know, if we think we've got to do everything right so that he'll be pleased with us and all that, his pleasure is being with us, is seeing someone who's seeking him. But on the other side of it, I do think that we have reduced God in many of our thinking, maybe in our prayer, to the genie that we're rubbing the bottle and asking him to come out and give all our wishes.
Mm.
You see, that isn't what Joshua was doing here. Joshua wasn't there continually before God saying, you know, I want a new car. I want, you know, he wasn't reciting all of his needs or even reciting his good friend's needs. He was there before God getting to know his glory. He was in his presence and going, wow, this is just awesome. He was becoming his friend. So when we focus on all the do's and don'ts, I'm not trying to say that there aren't do's and don'ts. Of course there are. Of course there are. But when we're focusing on that to get our justification for our relationship with God, we've gone off on a total sidetrack because we aren't listening to him. We aren't hearing his voice and what he would like for us to do. And too often we think that prayer is us reciting to God, but we don't ever stop and listen to him. If we would stop and listen to him, he would give us some direction sometimes, and he gave Joshua some direction in his life. You know, I mean, he had to get to the point of recognizing God's voice and to where God could even trust him to follow out what he was saying. And too often, we make our judgment on what is the direction of God by circumstances that happen around us.
So Yah is not presenting himself so far removed from us that he can't be approached, but rather asking us to approach him with a whole heart, with genuine focus, and more in seeking relationship than benefit.
Yeah, if it's all based on benefit, he's going to not like our sacrifices. You know, the reason I'm saying that is that when he says, you know, who asked you to give me these sacrifices? Well, he did. I mean, yes. You know, we got it in writing, folks. You know, we can go show him the contract, say you asked for this. But the thing is that what was happening is that the children of Israel were saying, okay, all I have to pay for this one sin is this lamb. Okay, well, yeah, the sin looks pretty good. That wasn't where God was wanting to go with that. God was expecting him, or expecting the person who was bringing the sacrifice, to have a heart of, I'm sorry, I did this. But instead it's, I'm making my payment. And you know, when we get to the making our payment stage and we start patting ourselves on the back because we think we're doing pretty good because we've done everything right, God's not really all that impressed with it.
So if our walk has been on the lacking side, doing Shabbat or observing Shabbat with a little more focus and scrutiny, or extra time and prayer and reading the Word doesn't measure up. He wants full teshuvah. He wants a turning from and a rejection of the sin, and not. Right. So, well, I tell you, Frank, coming from a holiness Pentecostal background, there was a lot of stress placed on us, and we felt like we need to come down to the altar and rededicate about every other service just to be sure. But you've helped today. You've clarified a lot. And folks, if you have comments or questions pertaining to this subject or others, you can reach us at Reunion Roadmap at B'naiYosefNA.com. Again, this is Barry Phillips and Frank Hout saying shalom, and thank you for listening in.
Deborah Pagel now sings Above the Stars. You can find more of her music at setapartministries.org.
This old world can be so cruel, full of sorrows, disappointment, and pain. And no matter which way you turn to run and hide, it all remains the same. But I'm gonna keep my head held high, 'cause my eyes are looking towards the sky. 'Cause I know, oh yes I know, that's where you are. Way above all the stars. And I know there are things I need to change, but all things won't change overnight. And my Lord, you know I'm a work in progress. All these trials I go through, they're really, really tough. But I'm gonna keep my head held high, and my eyes are looking to the sun. 'Cause I know, that's where you are. Way above all of the stars. And when I grow weary, you know I will. It's your grace and your mercy I'll receive. And these trials that I must go through, they're there to strengthen me. this I believe, and I'm gonna keep my head held high, 'cause my eyes are looking towards the sky. 'Cause I know that's where you are. Way above, way above, way above, way above, way above all of the stars. All of the stars way in the sky, ever so high, way above, way above, way above, way above, way above all of the stars, all of the stars.
Well, that was Deborah Pagel with her song, Above the Stars. Again, that is some original music. Deborah is one of the worship leaders at Set Apart Ministries, the Klika's congregation. I really appreciate the original music we've been able to hear on this program over the last couple of years we've been presenting it. We heard Barry Phillips with his band, the Aleph Tav Band, from right there at House of David Fellowship in Gloucester, Virginia. The music, Zephaniah, I believe, does mesh with what we heard from Barb and Bob, and then from Barry and from Frank Houts, because it gets to the heart of our calling. As Barry and Frank were saying, the title of their midrash, How to Approach the Holy God, we are called to be holy. We're called to be set apart. That's what holy means. But how often do we just overlook that and do not consider what it really means?
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. I do see what Barry and Frank were talking about. It relates so much so what the Klikas are all about up in Wisconsin, and Set Apart Ministries, trying to get ourselves in a position where we're not becoming stained by the world.
Right. As the scriptures tell us to be in the world, but not of it.
Yes.
And then so many times that we hear from Moses and from Peter in particular, the words of our Elohim when he says, be holy for I am holy.
Yes.
And I am the Lord your God.
Yeah.
Now, how is it, Zephaniah, do you think that the body as a whole could do better in this regard?
Well, I think when we look at B'nai Yosef North America, what we are all about is mutual respect.
Mm.
And I think that is has to be a foundational part of how we act and respond to one another. Certainly, we're not going to be run across certain issues that we may not agree with on each other. And the point is not to try to argue somebody into what we believe, but to actually respect that other person's belief and just say, hey, all of us don't all have the answers. We all have a different way of seeing it right now. But when it all comes to the end and everything is revealed, we're going to say, oh, I don't know if I saw it that way.
And that's a good point that Frank and Barry raised in their midrash, but it's one that we so often overlook when we think of people we disagree with, different interpretations of scripture or whatever. I believe one part of being holy, of being set apart, and in fact, that's the name of the Klika's ministry, Set Apart Ministries, is doing just what you said, recognizing the value in another person, whether they are from the traditional church, whether they are traditional Jewish, and they disagree with us on the identity of Messiah.
Yes.
or anything. What we ought to do is recognize God at work in them. And I think once we do that, we'll see, there is an element of holiness there also. And we better be careful if we want to touch it in any way.
Yes.
Well, that will bring us to the end of this edition of Reunion Roadmap. Thank you all for listening. We will be back again with a new show very soon. So on behalf of Tzvanya Pappas and our elders, Shavua Tov.
Thank you for joining us on Reunion Roadmap, a production of B'nai Yosef North America. Please come back next week for another visit with the people of the emerging house of Joseph here in North America.